That's my intro. Alright, hey, I'm Lauren, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my gap year experience and how it's been so far and what I've been doing. So, I graduated from high school in June of 2018, and before then I had applied to 6 schools, all of them in the Cal State or the UC system. I was rejected from 5 out of 6 of those schools, and the one that I was accepted to, I wasn't too excited to go to, so I just said, fuck it, I just won't go, I'm not ready and I don't want to. So I'm very, very lucky and privileged to have had the ability to take a gap year between high school and college. I'm still planning on going to college, and here I am. Alright, so once I decided to take a gap year, I started doing some research on different people's gap year experiences, travel experiences, work trading, and stuff like that. And I came across a YouTube video of a woman who had done something called WWOOF, which is WWOOF, which stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And I started doing more research into that, and basically what I found out is that through WWOOF, it holds a giant cornucopia of hosts from all over the world who own farms. And then you can apply to volunteer on those farms, but basically you're work trading, which means that in return for usually about 20 hours of work a week on a farm, you get food sometimes, but always stay. So after doing more research on WWOOF and deciding that it was something that I wanted to do, I started looking at different locations around the world, and basically I was kind of deciding between Australia and Hawaii randomly. I didn't really have any basis for why I wanted to go to either of those two places other than I knew that they were cool, and I ended up going with Hawaii, and that was an amazing decision because I had some really amazing times there, and I'm so glad that I did that. So once I decided to WWOOF in Hawaii, I started looking up all the host families on the WWOOFing website, and I started getting in contact with them. This took a lot of time and effort because basically you have to go through each host family's bio in the region that you want to go to, and you have to look at the things that they require and what accommodations you're all right with living in. Some of them you'll be living in a tent, some of them you'll be living in your own barn apartment, some of them, you know, all different sorts of living situations. At one of the places I was at, I actually had no electricity or plumbing for 2 months. So that was an experience that was challenging but so incredible, and I got so much out of it. So, you know, I guess if I'm recommending this to someone, I'd say be familiar with what you're okay with. So I got to Hawaii in September of 2018, which was when most of my friends were going off to school, so I kind of lined up my schedule like that. And the first farm that I was at was kind of a stereotypical farm. They had horses and cows, and they had a giant mahogany farm in the back, which was really cool to walk through. And a lot of the work that we did was in a greenhouse, just picking off slugs from plants and trying to kill fire ants. Fire ants are a giant thing in Hawaii, so that was fun. The second farm I was at wasn't actually a farm. Long story about how I got there. That was kind of crazy actually. But basically I was just living in this guy's house and kind of landscaping, so I would sit on a bucket for 5 hours a day and I would pick weeds out of moss, and I would listen to TED Talks, and that was my daily experience over there. I did live in a couple other places in Hawaii that I kind of just ended up in randomly, but that's what living in Hawaii is like, is just living with random people. But those are my 2 main farming experiences. The first one, I got super ripped and tan and like I really felt like a farmer there, but the second one was kind of just landscaping work, which was cool too because I also had a lot of freedom because I was living alone on that guy's 5-acre property and just doing that all day. But yeah, that was cool. I know that in different countries, if you go to places like Iceland or Ireland or even Japan, you might have different experiences, like you might be able to shear sheep, or if you're interested in aquaponics, or if you're studying anything in agriculture and you want to do more hands-on research in that, WWOOFing is a great resource for finding out different skills and stuff that you want to learn. So from my personal experience, I had some really fun and crazy times in Hawaii that didn't really start until about 3 weeks in. So for the first 3 weeks when I got there, I didn't know anyone, and a lot of the farms that are available in Hawaii are on kind of secluded property, so you don't have that many opportunities to meet people unless you're out in the community but I didn't even know where that community was or that it existed until someone else brought me to it. So that kind of happened when one day I was going with my host family and we were going to the big city, and I was just going to work on applications on my laptop. And we picked up 2 hitchhikers, and I hadn't even seen people hitchhiking until I saw these 2 kids, and they were my age, and then we started talking, and then we decided to hang out that night. And they showed me all these incredible things. Like, there's this one thing in Hawaii called the ecstatic dance, where basically everyone goes, it's like a club, but with trance music and all different ages, and in the daytime and the nighttime. Ecstatic is a good word for it. It was really fun. And then once I got involved in the community more, they also had these things called Sunday Fun Days, which was kind of a tradition on that side of the island, where we would go to the Maku'u market and we'd go to the farmer's market and we'd get all the fruits and vegetables that we would need for the week at a really good price. And half the time they were farmed by people we know, which was so cool. And then after we would go to the market, we would go to the beach and hang out there, and then we'd go to the park and dance in the drum circle, and really beautiful experience once I started getting out there more, which was great. One of the greatest things about traveling is just meeting people and being able to do that and getting involved in different communities that you might not normally. So I'm very grateful for that, and that I met Chris and Lee while they were hitchhiking to Hilo. One thing that I have had some questions on in my experience in woofing is about the costs. And so there's pretty much, because you're work trading and you're getting a lot of times free food and stay, there's only 3 things that you have to pay for, which is your flight to wherever you're going, and then transportation while you're in that location, and then occasionally food depending on whether or not your host provides it. So for your flight, one great tip that I have is to use Google Flights, because instead of going on to somewhere like Kayak or Expedia or something like that, Google Flights compares all of the flight tickets from all different hosts. So I would use that. You can also set up flight alerts. So if you're planning on buying a certain ticket on a certain date, you can get email alerts for when the price goes up or down and track it like that. And then for transportation, it's going to be very unique depending on where you go if you're woofing or work trading or whatever you're doing. For example, when I was in Hawaii, I was in kind of a rural place, so there wasn't always Uber, so we got around by hitchhiking. That was an intense but very gratifying experience. I met so many incredible people on the island, people who just opened up their hearts and their lives, and a lot of times even their homes to me, and I barely even knew them. But a great way to meet people is hitchhiking, and you might end up doing that if you travel in Hawaii or Europe, or I'm not really sure what other places in the world do that, but hitchhiking if you don't have Uber is a thing. And then for food and other miscellaneous things that you might have to buy along your journey, I would say make sure that you're keeping a tight budget, because when I first got to Hawaii, I would be like, oh, I can go out to a restaurant, that's fine. I can spend money this way and this way and this way, but then I realized that because I'm work trading, I don't have the time to have a job, whether it be online or somewhere in my vicinity. I also didn't have the transportation to be able to get to a job. And so it was kind of frustrating just watching my bank account just drain slowly, even though I was working hard every day. But yeah, just be very conscious about your budgeting and the food and whatever else you're buying. Alright, now I'm gonna go over some questions that I've had from people. So the first one is, was this something you wanted to do for a long time? From @motherfunker on Instagram. It became something I wanted to do when I started researching it more. It wasn't something that kind of just fell into my lap. I'm actually planning now on taking a 7-month journey. Starting next Monday, I'm traveling Southeast Asia with a different sort of work trading thing called World Packers. So with World Packers, I'll be working in hostels, I'll be teaching people English, I'll be working in restaurants, kind of taking up jobs wherever I go so that I can get more free food and stay, because that's a great deal. Instead of paying for hostels and paying for food, you know, to be immersed in a culture a little bit more by having a job in it will be great. But yeah. Alright, question number 2 is sleep schedule from @moon.od. So at the first farm I was at, I had a regimented schedule that I worked from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock pretty much every day. That farm was interesting because I was also living alone in my own barn apartment. And like I said before, I was pretty secluded, but I also had a lot of independence and freedom in doing that. But The only sort of freedom that I didn't have was a schedule that I was forced to stick to. But at the second farm I was at, all I had to do was work 15 hours a week. So that meant that I could kind of stay out late and party or do whatever I want, and then I could wake up the next day at 3 p.m. and then work till the sun went down, and whatever I needed to do to get in my 15 hours I did. So my sleep schedule varied a lot depending on where I was. Alright, the next one is, did you work 7 days a week? No, I did not. I worked, well, at the second farm I was at, sometimes I would just sit down for 7 hours a day, 2 days in 1 week and 7.5 hours. And I would just pick weeds and then get it all over with and then have 5 days of freedom to myself. At the first farm I was at, however, I worked 5 days a week and I didn't really have the same flexibility in that. Alright, the next question is from @moon.od once again. What part of the day did you most look forward to? Ooh, I would say when I was living without electricity or plumbing, sometimes my neighbors who were actually kind of my hosts, when they were gone in the big city or whatever, they would let me go next door and use their hot shower, and oh my gosh, hot water became such an amazing luxury that I realized that before I didn't have it, I definitely took for granted. So taking a hot shower, I didn't get access to every day, but that was definitely one of the things that I most look forward to. The next one is from @Jillian Rule. Do you recommend a gap year? I definitely do. I know that it's working out great for myself. I think that everyone's different, and some people really are ready immediately for a secondary education. I wasn't, and I can tell because I know I've matured so much in these past 3 months, and I'm ready for an education now, but I wasn't before because I was so burnt out. So it really depends on the person, I think, whether a gap year would work for them, but it's working out great for me, and I feel like that's all I can say about that. The next one is from @CivilFemme. How supportive were your parents about it? I'm so lucky because my parents have always been pretty supportive about whatever I've decided to do. I think naturally anxious people, as myself, are pretty good at planning because we think through every detail because we're anxious. And so once I showed them that I had everything worked out, I was gonna be safe, I was gonna be fine, they were like, yeah, cool, do it, go. So I'm grateful for that, but it may take some convincing and just some planning and thinking if your parents aren't the same way. Alright, so the next question is, what did you learn? From @JClark103. I would say one of the biggest takeaways that I got from my time in Hawaii is that we are products of our environment. Before going there, I'd struggled a fair amount with depression and eating like shit and just feeling like shit all the time. But over there, there's so much emphasis on happiness and health and nutrition that once I started getting into that, I started seeing the value in it. And I actually became a way more spiritual person, which has been an interesting transformation for myself. But yeah, the correlation between environment and personal identity is very strong, and I didn't realize that before, especially living in SoCal. I think there's kind of so much glamour around like feeling like shit and like struggle and all that stuff that doesn't have to be there. But yeah, that's just my take on it. Right, so the next question is, what was the most difficult part about staying on farms and switching between host families? From @Krista, KRXTA on Instagram. Alright, this is such an interesting question because this was quite a dilemma at some points. So the transition from my first farm to my second farm was definitely not how I planned it to be, but you know, roll with the punches. So when I was staying on my first farm, I'd planned to stay there for 1 month and then transfer to a different farm just to try something new for the next 2 months that I would be there. So I had plans lined up with this one guy, and he was like, oh yeah, I'll pick you up at this time and all this is gonna happen. And I was like, okay, perfect, it's set. So the day comes and I'm all packed up from the house that I was living at on my first farm, and I'm ready to go to my second farm. And this guy's a little late, and I call him and it doesn't pick up, so I'm like, okay, that's okay, maybe he's just driving. So that happens for 6 more hours. My breaking point was probably around, I don't know, 9 or 10 p.m. when I was like, all right, this guy's definitely not gonna show up. No call, no show. So I was like, shit, because there was another group of people planning to come and live where I was the next day. So it wasn't like I could just stay a little longer. It didn't work like that. I was essentially kind of homeless for that moment. So I was like, ah, shit. All right, well, I can either cry about it or I can just figure it out. So I frantically went on the WWOOF website and I started contacting everyone that had their phone number in their bio and saying like, hey, I'm in a sticky situation. I will work my ass off if you let me stay on your farm for even a couple of days while I figure something else out. And thank God, Jeffrey, my King Jeffrey answered, and he was like, oh yeah, I can pick you up tomorrow, no problem, you're obviously like a good person, blah blah blah, whatever. So it was interesting because he actually lived with his girlfriend next door to the farm. It was just a landscaping thing that I was at, so I was alone on his 5 acres of property. So interesting how things turned out pretty incredibly, even though that moment was a little scary. But switching between farms, especially when you have a lot of luggage and no guaranteed form of transportation, because like I said, Uber didn't really work out there because the roads weren't paved, was a challenge, but nothing that I or anyone couldn't handle. Alright, which Hawaiian island or islands did you go to? From @AngieDante. I went to the Big Island completely out of randomness. I didn't know about the differences between the islands like I do even now. And yeah, I just picked that randomly, but it was incredible. It was definitely the most kind of hippie centric. So that was so exciting and fun to be immersed in that culture. If I went anywhere else, Malachi would be super cool. That's actually where they put people with leprosy in like the mid 20th century or 21st, I don't even know, but it's a very secluded island and apparently extremely beautiful, and I've heard great things about Kauai too. Alright, and then the last question is from @Sydney.Rincon. Did it change your views on anything? Yeah, definitely a lot. I matured emotionally. I think I would count that as changing my views on things, because I felt like I had more responsibility for my happiness, being completely in charge of myself, and I felt completely in control of the way that I reacted to things, especially once I realized that optimism and that a good life is more about perspective than circumstances. So yeah, very gung-ho, but still true and authentic. So thank you to everyone who asked a question. I hope you enjoyed this video. Yeah, contact me. You probably know how to if you're watching this. If you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And yeah, peace out.